I think that probably the easiest way to think of tariffs is they're a tax on imported goods. The importer who's bringing these goods in pays the tariff, but in order to kind of capture back the money that they need, having paid that tariffs, those prices are passed on to consumers, and it means that products have higher prices. I think what you've been hearing more recently is just kind of broad-based tariffs on everything, and those have huge impacts and obviously have impacts on prices to consumers.
Tariffs are essentially fees imposed on goods that come into the US. So it's a tax on anything that's imported from elsewhere and being sold here. Like in very modern applications, the goal has been, like, if they've been enforced, it's been to kind of cut down on unfair trade practices, right? To try and protect US manufacturing.
So when you're talking about prices of food, not only does it impact things that we import into this country, and we have a lot of relationships where, in seasons, like in the winter, we import produce from countries like Mexico, where it's warmer and they have products coming that we aren't growing as much in the wintertime. And we are exporting other times. But when you put sweeping tariffs like this in place, you're going to raise prices at the grocery store, and you're going to hurt our farmers and our producers right here in the US who are trying to export goods. So prices go up, but jobs and local economies are impacted too.
What we're seeing right now, though, is not a targeted, timely kind of strategic approach. It's basically, we're seeing tariffs levied on everyone that we have a trade imbalance with, which, when you're talking about manufacturing or goods, that's a lot of countries. I think what I've heard the stated goal to be is, to protect American manufacturing, to correct the trade deficit. But the tariffs that we've seen applied in the past haven't actually added to that economic benefit. The last part of the 19th and 20th centuries, when we had very similar and high tariffs on other countries. And actually what the authors of that study found was that it reduced America's manufacturing productivity.
Well, they can be applied strategically. So instead of sweeping, make sure they're very targeted, so that there is a reason. They're targeted tariffs because of particular trade issues or issues within industries, or to help boost domestic production of products.
I think a very targeted, timely, narrowly drawn tariff with the goal of knowing what you want. What is success? It can help right a trade wrong, right? It can help fix a bias. But I think it works best through trade agreements. I've always been a supporter of fair and free trade agreements, because again, that gives us a mechanism to go and address that inequity in a targeted way. But the broad tariffs that are very, very deep, they're across all sectors, I think are going to have a pretty big impact on the American economy.
Well, when you have sweeping tariffs put in place like those that have been, the Trump administration has proposed against Canada and Mexico, that means raising prices here. It means raising prices on the goods that we're importing from those countries, but it also means those countries aren't just going to say, okay, they're going to retaliate and put tariffs on American goods that are being exported. That impacts a lot of our producers. It means that they don't have access to markets. And it seems like one place that almost always is a target of retaliation is agriculture.
I do think that because of the US or the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement, right? We have a trade agreement with both of these partners. Tariffs would not be the first thing I would start with. We're trade partners with Canada, and they have softwood lumber products that are imported. And the way that Canada facilitates the companies that cut that wood in Canada, it's essentially giving them an unfair market advantage. It's basically undercutting American softwood lumber manufacturers. We had a mechanism because of that trade agreement to address that, and to, in an ongoing way, address that. Just throwing a tariff on them, I don't know I mean, if our goal is to end that unfair market practice, I don't know if that does it. It just so far has created hard feelings and retaliation. I think China has been unwilling to address not just the trade imbalances, but the illegal theft of proprietary information, military secrets, concern for the health and well-being of Americans. And so this is one area where I feel like, though a broad-based, deep, eye-watering tariff is a bit of a blunt force instrument, at least this is the first administration I've seen in a long time who's willing to actually do something about China. Is this the best thing? Is it the best way applied? I can't answer that, but at least they're doing something. And I do think China does need to be held to account.
What we're hearing from the administration, the proposal on Canada, on Mexico, and even on China have been sweeping tariffs, and those have broad impacts and again cause retaliation back, which also has broad impacts on many industries here in the US. Congress is supposed to have a say on tariffs, and so doing it in a way where the administration isn't working with Congress also is not the way things are supposed to work. It's not the way our laws work either. We have trade agreements that we work on so that we have ways where we can do trade back and forth, and dispute settlement. And we actually have a trade agreement with Canada and with Mexico, USMCA, an agreement that was done under the Trump administration the first time. And that's where you work to make sure you have trade policy on how goods are going to flow back and forth, and a dispute settlement mechanism where if you have concerns, you go through this process. The tariffs that are being, that the Trump administration has been looking at would go totally around an agreement that they helped put in place and say, no, we're just going to put tariffs in place anyway. So it blows up the agreements, the settlement process, and then you do have retaliation and you have trade wars as a result.
The Constitution actually gives the authority to regulate trade to Congress. That is where the ultimate authority rests. Now, there have been laws that Congress has delegated to the president, and certainly the president has a right to, sign treaties. But the regulation of trade is left to Congress, not just for between the states and with tribal nations, but it's international trade as well. And I think if we see this I don't think this administration is worried about a trade war for its own reasons, and that's its own prerogative. But I do think that the impact on our economy, on Americans and consumers, on businesses and productivity, if we start to see this begin to slip into a recession, which it's not a certainty, but it is now a possibility as a result of these tariffs that are again, they're not targeted and timely. They are broad-based and they're on everybody. If we start to see our economy slip into a recession, I think that's Congress's prerogative, should step into that prerogative and fix it. And there's many different tools that they have, but they're legislative and they have the authority to bring that balance back. And we'll see if they will. I don't know if they will, but it is one of the ways I would advocate for if we are in the middle of a trade war and things need to change. I would advocate Congress stepping up as the co-equal branch.